All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's see who we got on so far. Hey, BK. I'll get started in a minute or two. I figure hopefully people will join us. I've been trying to post that I'd be going live. For anybody catching this, obviously not after live. If there's questions or whatever, just post them in the threads related to the libraries. So I've made the buttons in the upper corner. Actually, you don't really need me. Let's just go to full screen. Also, hopefully sound is working. I checked it before, but hopefully you guys are hearing me. Sometimes computers like to mess with me. Hey, CBR Sawyer, welcome tonight. Um, Hopefully you guys are hearing me. Let's see. Crystal Ball's joining. So tonight, I'm primarily going to be talking the Phase 2 library, but I did see, since we went live with the public access for, oh, great, thanks. I was hoping I wasn't talking to dead air. Thanks, guys. So I'm going to touch on a few things that are kind of universal to Phase 1, which is now public access, but more of this will be kind of a prep for Phase 2. Phase 2's trying to launch. I actually ran into a couple more bugs. I'm going to try to avoid them in tonight's demo. Phase 2 is so much bigger than phase 1, and it's taken me so much longer that I'm still testing pieces of it. And every time I test something and I fix something, I find a little something. But the goal is to get it up and launched probably this weekend. I mean, I said that last weekend, but there's a lot coming, so that's what I want to do. So tonight I'll start off some kind of generic stuff that's universal to phase 1 and 2, just because as it's now public access for phase 1, I'm getting some questions that I thought I had kind of covered, but I figure I'll cover them again for everybody joining who's just using the public access. For those of you who are in early access patron, phase 2 will be rolling out shortly, just as soon as I finish testing a few pieces and fix a few things that I found. And I've got to shoot a couple videos, this being one of them. So this video will be added to the top. So these videos here at the top of the library, this goes for phase 1 and 2. They're there for a reason. A lot of the questions that I've gotten so far about phase 1 are answered in those, or at least touched on. But if you have questions, I do have Crucible threads. So it's a lot easier if you just use the link here. It's going to take you to one of these Crucible threads. I've got one set up for phase 1 and one set up for phase 2, just because the functionality is different. But if you ask your questions there, first of all, it's easier for me to keep track of which ones I've answered, which ones I haven't, but it also leaves your question and my answer or anybody else's answer for future people to come in and find. So posting, I've seen a couple questions in like Facebook posts. I've got a few messenger messages. It just is very hard to keep up with all that stuff. So use the links that are at the top here for any questions. And also, if you go into those links, you'll see that there is there's questions people have asked before. So if you have a question and you see it asked there, I need a drink, excuse me. Sorry, throat got dry. You'll be able to see the answer. But that being said, so one of the big things in both phase 1 and 2, for those who haven't really played with the library yet, is the new style recipes. Now, phase 1 only really has 2 recipes, and they were kind of the groundwork to get started. The idea of the style recipes in the library is a lot of times I've gotten questions, hey, how do I make this blade style or that blade style? And the answer is really how you want to. That's the reason for the library. Everything is pretty much customizable. And OS7's customizations is probably exponentially more than there was in the OS 6 library, just because of how I've designed it. So the real answer is this blades can look like however you want, but certain font makers in particular have like styles that they usually want to pair up. And in the past, they've included code, like a text file with the code with their fonts, which is great. But the problem is the speed at which Proffie moves forward. A lot of those styles that I've come across are like OS 5 styles, which are kind of old. In terms of Proffie capabilities, they're ancient. So then it becomes a little bit difficult for font makers to keep their styles up to date. So what I've been doing is I've reached out to a few font makers. I've worked with a couple so far. I've got a couple that I just haven't had time, and I have a couple who I haven't had replies yet. If any of you on here talk to font makers, I know a couple of you are font makers, and you see something that you want to talk about, hit me up. You can hit me up through the Crucible, or you can hit me up through the Facebook groups, because I am trying to work with as many as I can. Now, time obviously gets in the way, so I know I owe a few people some replies. I've been pretty much any free time I get, I've been working on this library. So that's why I haven't gotten back to everybody. But the goal, or my goal, is to be able to support as many font makers as possible for Proffie, so that you can have those really unique styles, you can have everything. But by putting what I'm calling the recipes together, that'll allow them to carry forward. So when we get to OS 8, the OS 7 recipes will move over, and then that way you can still use those recipes, and then we can also add to them, and then they're customizable. So the other thing is, when you have style code, like in a text file that's a year old, 2 years old, it's also just that static style. So, and I know people can take that style and drop it in the editor and make changes, but not a lot of users are doing that, or some users get lost, or some users don't know how to do it. So that's where the library is trying to help, is that you can put together how the style should look based on what the font maker wants, but then still allow all the customization that the library provides. So long-winded. So the phase one, and like I said, some of this is going to be phase one, phase two. We are looking at phase two library. Phase one had Kyberphonics, Jesse's Survivor font, and he put together, I worked with him on a special party mode. And if you don't know what party mode is, there's a couple videos on my channel. But basically, in the video game, if you set your saber on the workbench to party mode, every time you swing it, it would change the color, it would change the effect, it would change the sounds of the style. We built the styles for that and then matched up with Kyberphonics font to make that possible. For phase two, this list will be growing. So phase one was just kind of like the little seedling. So it only had the Kyberphonics. But I've already worked with Wansith on 2 of his fonts, and there's a couple more in the pipeline. And I'm also starting to populate character stuff. So I know this might be a little small for you guys' screen, but Wansith, I worked with Wansith on his Duality font, which is a Luke and Vader font, so father-son. And it uses the all font capability, and it switches back and forth between the light side blue and the dark side red. Actually, let's load up that recipe just so I can kind of give you a little walkthrough on it. So with the recipes, the idea is you choose what you want, and then these are either set up for font or set up for character. The one set up for character right now are my interpretation. So I just did the Ahsoka series because I know everybody's clamoring for it, and we'll take a look at those in a minute. But this is for Wansith's Duality blade font. This is the blade style that goes with it using the alt font capabilities. So we're going to choose our main blade, and we're going to go, and this is basically set up already. So this preloads what needs to be there, but you can add to it. So if you want to change effects, if you want to change colors, if you want to make other adjustments, you can still do that in the enhancement screen. But this start off is built out just to work exactly like the style was designed by Wansith. So in this one, we have the special ability set for special ability 1. And special abilities are a big piece of OS 7. There'll be a lot of discussion of them. They're basically essentially free controls through my prop. There's technically 8 of them. There's 4 while your saber's on, 4 while it's off. You can choose a number of different things you can do with those. So what we've basically, I guess I should start at the beginning. So OS 7 is introduced so many new features. So what's been happening, we had, I think since OS 3, we've been adding a lot of new features each time. So OS 3 went into OS 4, which added your gestures. OS 5 added the ignitions and all that stuff, added a bunch of new effects. OS 6 added edit mode, but also added a ton of underlying stuff. OS 7, we dumped like everything plus the kitchen sink into it. And what happens is on a saber, you basically have 1 or 2 buttons. I know there's some people asking about 3 buttons, but you essentially have 1 or 2 buttons. And through position and gestures and holding one button and clicking another, or doing a long click or a short click or a double click or a triple click, we have a set number of actual controls available to us. So it's kind of you're stuck, right? There's a point where we can't add new features that require controls because we're almost out of controls. Now, there's some ways we can get around it, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall before we started on OS 7. I said, hey, I've got 25 things I want to add to my prop. I do not have 25 more controls. And not all 25 of the things that I want to add does everybody else want to add. So that's where the special abilities came in. Is the special abilities are essentially empty slots on your control configuration that you can load up whatever you want. Now, the side effect of that is that how we did it is they're controlled through the style. So when you build a style code, it now has those 8 slots that can do anything you can think of. And then what's going to happen is those now tell the prop how to control the saber for those specific controls. But because it's style code that controls it, for those of you who don't know what style code is, that's the style code in the past was just what made the lights do the thing. Made the your LED strip light blue, or start an ignition at the bottom and slowly scale up, or have a flame effect, or have a localized lockup. Those are all controlled by the style code, but it's all visual effects. OS 7, we gave the style code the ability to control controls, which are what special abilities are doing, and also to control sounds, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So in the special abilities now, there's a lot of options you can add, and because it's at the style code level, every one of your presets can actually have different uses. So like your special ability, like this special ability here. So this particular setup only has one set right now. Special ability 1 is going to use the alt font. What that's going to do is it's going to change the color of the blade to red, meaning Vader. But if you're using wants this font, or if you use a font that's set up for alt font, which is required with this specific setup, it'll also change the sounds. So when you use your special ability, we're going to change over to the red saber. And if you use special ability 1 again, you're going to change back. But we can do those special abilities to do a number of things, which we'll go through. And some of them are going to be only in phase 2. Some of them are available in phase 1. But now you can set this preset up with this style code to do this, and then you can go build a completely new preset where special ability 1 does something totally different. And then you can build it. So what ends up happening is through the special abilities, every one of your presets can act differently using the same controls. So you can have a number of features that you really like and mix and match them and put them in different presets. And then what that does is it gives you even more experience using the limited controls we do have. So let me just say the other piece that I worked on with Wansith, right? So this is, again, for his duality font. He did use this also on the Tano's lesson, I believe is the name. And if I got the name wrong, I apologize. Which was from the new Ahsoka series where they had the flashback where Anakin and Vader are flashing. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the series, I apologize. I'm making the assumption anybody in this particular video that's this interested in saber technology has seen Ahsoka. If you haven't, and you really don't want any spoilers because they're probably going to come out of my mouth, you can leave and come back after you've seen the episode. He uses this style code for the same. Oh, hey, Wansith is on. Oh, I didn't get to say hi to everybody. I'm sorry. I'm peeking at 2 screens. So yes. So one of the things that Wansith, who is now in the chat, brought up was we have lightning block. So lightning block for a Jedi is obviously they're blocking the lightning that a Sith is throwing. And except for obviously certain scenes where we do have Sith on Sith violence, Sith typically aren't blocking lightning; they're the ones throwing it. So what I did working with Wansith, and that's one of the big upgrades for phase 2, is now we have the ability for the lightning block effect to be different also for each of these different phases, and that runs with the special ability and the alt font. So when I'm in the blue for Luke and I do my lightning block, it's a regular lightning block effect. And then when I change over to Vader, when I go to do lightning block, it actually changes the effect. And the effect is now a force lightning throw. So you get a force lightning throw instead. And that's tied to the alt font and the color itself. So when you're in light side, you do your lightning block effect. you're going to get your normal lightning block. And then when you're in your Sith side, you do your lightning block effect. You're actually going to get it's meant to mimic the firing of Force Lightning. And the sounds are also set up that way for once. So that's why I work with the font makers, because the new capabilities in OS 7 a lot of them are tied to the fonts, particularly alt font, but a lot of them are tied to what the sounds are now going to be able to do. All right, let's go to, I'm going to leave this style up for a minute and show you the special ability. So when you use the recipe, so this is the recipe for Wansith's duality. And if you're joining late, you'll want to watch the beginning of the video. So I'm sorry I didn't, let me pause and say hi to everybody who's in the chat. Thanks for joining. Let me catch back up. And I don't know that I missed any questions. If there were any questions, I'm going to try to get to them after I go through my kind of spiel here. Let's see. I think I said hi to Cristobal. I know I said hi to BK, CBR Saber, or CBR Sawyer. Apologies. Silver Falcon is on. Adam. Hey, Adam. Oh, Megtooth. Hey, how's it going, Megtooth? Thanks for joining. Wansith, I did see you come in. Zero. I think that's everybody. If I missed you, it's not on purpose. I'm turning my head back and forth between two screens. But all right, let me get back to where I was showing. So, in the recipe for okay, Sawyer. Sorry, I try to read the screen names, but sometimes they're even hard to read. The where was I? Special abilities. In the recipe for Wansith, there's only one special ability set up, and that's to change phases. So that leaves these slots open. And right now, there's a list. Again, some of these, this screen and what I'm primarily talking about is phase 2, which is coming to early access. So those are my Patreon members who've signed up for early access. But some of these are already in the phase 1, so there's definitely some crossover there. But if you're going to the phase 1 library, the public access, and you don't see something I'm talking about tonight, that's because this is the phase 2 stuff. Like I said in the intro, I'm trying to touch on both, but the main focus tonight is getting stuff ready for the phase 2, which is launching soon. I'm aiming for this weekend. I've been aiming for weekends. I've been working on this all the free time I have for at least since August. There's just so much coming. So I have some more stuff to fix, some stuff to test, and then I'm pretty close. I'm done adding stuff. Now I'm making everything work how it's supposed to. But so with the special abilities now, as I said, you can pick other ones. So if you are somebody who likes quotes, you can choose to pick quotes. Oh, this is a good one. I'll show this. This is only in phase 2 right now. And this is going to lead to a conversation we're going to have in a minute. But I did activate the rain mode capability. So rain mode, we've had rain effects for a long time. It's meant to be looking like, like in the video game Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, when you're in a rain environment, like you get the little drips on the blade and it kind of shows like a little spark, and technically it has a little puff of steam, and you can get a little bit of sound. But it's always been a fixed effect, and it never had sound. So I have a video from the proof of concept on my channel, if you haven't seen it already. But I've added the effect now to library for phase 2, and it's going to require a specific sound to be set up. But how it works now is you can turn that on and off. So I'm setting special ability 2 for rain mode now. And then now when I go to do special ability 2, I'm going to get that rain effect on the blade. This also triggers the sound effect, which is what I'm building up to talk about the sound effects, because all of OS 7 adds so many new sound effects that we have to talk about. But so now with special ability 2, I can turn it on and off. So this way, it's a little more realistic. Instead of just always having a preset that ran rain effects, now, because of what we're able to do in OS 7 and the special abilities, you're able to turn that effect on and off, and it has a visual effect and it has a sound effect. And then again, you choose where you want that control. And if you're somebody who doesn't want that rain effect or doesn't use the rain effect, you don't have to set it. And because we're putting this stuff in the style code, we're not going to use up any of your memory for that effect, which is part of the other reason we moved a lot of this stuff into the style code, is that as we add, I mean, technically, I think just in capabilities for OS 7, there's probably like 50 new capabilities that are dropped in. But you can't, I mean, we can't load all 50. I don't think a style code could handle it, but you can mix and match from there. But people aren't going to want all 50, or people might not use all 50. So we're not going to, and 50 is, I'm pulling it out of thin air because I've lost count of everything that's not possible, because it's every time I think, I think that's all of it, and then I go try something else works. So we've got more coming. But now you can add that as a special ability. The other thing that's in, and this one's in phase 1 and 2, just so I can, anybody who's only using phase 1. We also have a bunch of new ignition capabilities. So you can actually use special abilities 5 through 8. So 1 through 4 run while the blade is on, and then 5 through 8 run while the blade is off. And then what we do is you can now set up different ignition capabilities. And so we can do a number of things. So you can choose to just build a unique ignition on a special ability. So we could set special ability 5 just to be an ignition, and you can set up that ignition to be different than your normal ignition. And you can set it to be different however you want. You can choose a completely different effect. So let's do like we'll do a wipe in. And then we can set different times. Now, if you wanted to, and this came up in discussions on phase 1, and it applies to phase 1, if you wanted to auto time to your ignition sound, you would set to 0. Otherwise, it's a fixed time, and it's in milliseconds. But I'll leave it at that. And then you can also choose, the overlays are basically like power-up effects. So you can have it so that we add a power-up effect. So let's do a unstable power-up in reverse because we're wiping in. How long you want that to run and what color you want it to be. So that's special ability 5. And then for special ability 6, let's do a next phase in Ignite. And that's because we have, this is a multi-phase style from the duality one. And we'll do a next phase Ignite. And for this ignition, we'll do, let's do a lightning strike. Whoops. I'm going to have bugs. These are what I'm talking about, I'm working on. So this one has a bug. So we can't do lightning strike. We got to fix that bug too. We'll do a center out. And I'm going to make this one take a little longer. Let's go 600. Oops. And no overlay on that. And you can play around with what you want. And I see there's some questions. So I'll get to those in actually shortly. So special ability 5 and 6 are set. So if I go to special, so let's do normal ignition, just power, it's just a normal wipe. All right. Now, if I do special ability 5, I got a wipe in with an overlay effect. And now let's do special ability 6. So special ability 6 is going to do next phase and ignite. So that's going to change to my red blade, and it's going to use a center out ignition. So, power off, 6. So, and because this is set up with all font, that also means that the sounds for the red effect, for the red blade, will also be activated. And again, this is, you build this how you want it to work. And because we have the 5 through 8, you have your primary ignition effect, which is built in, and then you have 4 additional slots. If you wanted to have like a quick ignite one, you can also do where we have quotes. So if you want to do one that says a quote and then ignites, or vice versa, if you want to do one that ignites and says a quote, we can do that. That won't obviously show in the library, but so we could do play sound and ignite, and then you can choose either a specific quote, a random quote, sequential quote. You could have it so that your track activates automatically, and then, or we can have a transition sound, which we're also going to talk about. But you could set that up as a special ability too. So if I wanted to say, like, everybody goes to the Darth Maul, where you have the ignition and you have the soundtrack kick up. You could technically set the special ability every time you do your special ability 7, it starts your track. Now, track is the default track. So that's the default track to the preset. Track player from OS 6 is different. That still runs through the normal thing. The style code can't talk to track player because of how track player works. It plays the default track. Now, if you tell it to use play a sound and then to ignite, and you tell it to use a track and there's no track on the preset, it's going to just ignite. Same thing if you tell it to play a quote and ignite, So specific quote, you would pick the quote number. That's the file number. So if you have quote 0, quote 01, quote 02, quote 03, you would just put in the number you want and it will play that specific quote. And then it will ignite the saber, or vice versa. You could do it the other way around. You can have the saber ignite and then play the sound. But those are all set up as special abilities now. And what it does is, first of all, it takes away the need for the preons, because preons were the old way we would have somebody quote and then an ignition. And then it moves it so you can have it when you want it. So because these special abilities are in addition to your normal power button or your normal ignitions, it gives you that ability to have certain ignitions triggered by different controls, where you can have the ignition can look different. It can be a different speed. It can have different colors on it. And then you can add sounds to it. And then, as I showed with the next phase one, you can also, if you have a multi-phase or a Kyber select, so Kyber select is where you have multiple colors but the same style, but they're switched out. Multi-phase means you have multiple styles with different colors that switch out. But you can set them up so that you can always call one. So like, say you set up like this one, I always, if I have the back and forth between blue and red, and every time I ignite, I want it to be the different color, I can set it up so that it's going to be next phase and ignite. And every time I use that special ability, it will go to the next phase and ignite. When I use my normal ignition, it will just be whatever was already active. And you can also have it go back and forth. So there's a lot of controls in here. But special abilities, for those of you who weren't able to use the early access library and are just new to the public access, special abilities, the capabilities of special abilities alone, just in phase one, is, I mean, I think there's 30 total unique combos you can do. Maybe it's more. I didn't do the math. 36. There's a lot in there to play with. And then again, they're all customizable. That's the other big piece. That's part of the reason that OS7's library is taking so long. Is in OS6, a lot of stuff was, I just kind of designed it and I presented it. I wanted to give more customization in OS7. So what that meant was a lot of stuff that was already there, I've had to expand the interfaces so that you can customize it more. So there's a ton more customization in OS7. So stuff that used to have to take the style code, go to style editor, change out a timing, change out the size of something, change out the color of something that was fixed. That's all now in this interface. So you can do it in real time in the library and get your style code without having to take it elsewhere. Some pieces are still in production, but most of it's now fully customizable. All right, so let's go to, I did see a question that I want to touch on. I'm going to bring this up. So, hey, Sawyer. So he's referring to special ability where activated toggle rain mode. We're going to talk about this in just a second. I'm going to show it. So it can be whatever sounds you want. The rain mode will produce the code for both the visual effect of the rain hitting the blade, but it also includes the new synergy capabilities that allow for a sound to be tied to that. And what it does is it actually runs a looping sound. So, and I guess we can talk about it now, but I'm going to talk about it, show a couple more examples, and then probably circle back on it. So again, anybody joining late, welcome. I see Ronan Sabers join. I talked about a lot at the intro that I'm kind of building upon. So if you missed the beginning of the video, when we're done here, definitely go back and watch the beginning if you're lost. And if you have questions, ask them in the Crucible, which I also talk about in the beginning of the video. But building upon the idea of OS7, in that OS7 has so much packed into it and so many new capabilities. What we did with special abilities and also with these new sound effects is we wanted to make it so that it's a ton more customizable. So sound effects with the OS. So since OS 5, the sounds have been basically the same because we introduced lightning block, we introduced melt. The color change stuff, I think, was actually 3. But sound effects, what happens is any sound effect has to exist in the OS. Whether your font includes it or not, it has to be represented. The OS has to know how to handle that sound file. That's why there's specific naming conventions and a way to set everything up. And like I said, what led to OS7 was I had idea upon idea, and I'm not the only one. Obviously, Frederick has a ton of ideas. But from my library's point of view, a lot of these are things I've been chasing for a long time. And without the ability for, without Frederick showing me how to do it and Frederick helping me get this stuff done, this wouldn't be possible. But I've wanted to add so many new capabilities. And what was going to happen is we can't add, 15, 20 new sound effects to the OS. It would bog everything down. So that's where these two new sounds that seem innocuous come into play. And the first is what's called a transition sound. And it's actually just tr.wave. It's obviously like tr01, tr02, tr03.wave. That's essentially a generic empty slot for a sound effect that the style code controls. And that's that synergy stuff that I talked about. It feels like an eternity ago. That's one piece of the puzzle. So, and I'm gonna show you how this comes into play and what the library does for it. But TR sounds, the transition sounds, can be anything. It can be the sound of a lightning strike. It can be the sound of an alarm going off. It can be a menu sound, like when you go into the video game, the Survivor video game, and you go in and out of that little workbench. It can be any of that. So, like in Jesse's party mode font, the TR00 sound is this little menu sound from the video game that's there, and it's small, but that's when you go in and out of party mode. We added that sound. It's the TR transition sound effect is a empty slot, but the sounds have to be there. So that's what I'm going to touch on. But the sounds can be anything, and they can be, and in a single preset, in a font, we can have one TR sound that does your thunderstorm, or we can have one TR sound that does a menu. We can have one TR sound that does an ice effect. We can have one TR sound that does like a fireball. We can have, if you're into anime, you can have a TR sound effect that does, like throwing an electricity ball. I forget the name. I'm sorry. I'm going to lose my nerd credentials. But the idea of the TR sound is it can be anything that the style requires. And it can happen at any point in the style because the style code tells the prop file when to play that sound and which specific sound to play. So how I see it is eventually, as this library gets built up and eventually as font makers are supporting this stuff, is you'll have a folder of TR sounds that have a ton of really unique things, and you can call them from the style code and use them at different points of your interaction just to expand on it. And then the second piece of that, which is tied to this rain effect, is we have another sound, which is again a generic sound called transition loop. And just like it sounds, that's a looping sound effect. And that's what comes into play with the rain mode. So when we do rain mode, anybody who's joining late, we're going to toggle rain mode with special ability 2. It's going to add the rain dancing on the blade effect. It's also, when you set this up with the sound of TR loop, it's going to trigger whatever sound effect you want for the rain. It could be a thunderstorm. I have, and I forget who gave it to me because it was probably like 5 years ago, but I have what used to be a track of just a sizzle sound. So it was just like the sound of like rain hitting the blade and like puffs of steam coming out. And that's what I did in the demo, and the demo video's there. But TR loop is what runs that, and it's just a looped sound effect. So you can almost think of it as a lockup sound effect. But that's what TR loop is going to be. So the special ability for rain mode is going to include the code to run the TR loop. And then it's going to be on the users or the font makers to put that sound effect into the font. So let's get to that. And I'm going to show you the TR setup and the TR loop setup, but they're whatever you need them to be. But so what will happen is I'm going to generate this code just to show you the next piece of the puzzle. Let me pull this question down, sorry, because it's blocking what I want to show. And if I missed other questions, I'm going to try to get to them. But let's get the style code. And let's grab I was playing with this earlier. I don't need this right now. I'm going to paste it. Now, this looks like a lot. Don't go crazy. But the top section of your style that's generated by the library now contains way more information than OS 6. this whole section here. So this section of style code is extremely important. It needs to stay with the style code. This is also more of my time has been put in building a library to handle setting this up than anything else, because in order to make a lot of these new capabilities work, I have to tell you what you chose and how to set it up. So in here, we'll find special ability 2, and you'll see it says toggle rain mode, and then it's telling you, and I might clean up how this prints out, but it's telling you, let me zoom in so you guys can zoom in, what it uses. So this mode on special ability 2 uses tr loop 0.wave. So if your font includes tr loop 0.wave, that would be your rain effect. And that's the sound that would play when you're in rain mode. So you'll have the visual effect of the rain hitting the blade, and then the TR loop is what plays over your hum, over your swings, over everything else. And that can be whatever you want your rain effect to sound like. If you just want like the distant roar of thunder, or like I said, if you want the little sound of the raindrops hitting the blade and you get like a little distortion and a little sizzle sound, it can be anything. The sound is going to fall on either the users or the font makers, but the style is calling for it. So your ability is already there in the style code to get that running. You just need to support it with the actual sound. Same thing. Oh, it's not in this one. Let me generate a different style. So, and that's going to freeze up because it's highly complex. Let me get away from it. Same thing if we choose, oh, we had one, right? Oh, we had next phase. Let's do, oh yeah, we did play sound and ignite specific quote. That should be in there. Yeah, so special ability 7, you'll see it says play sound and ignite, and that one uses quote 0. And that's because you told it to use a specific quote. So if we go back here, so say you have quote file 1 that you wanted to play. So you wanted it to be like Obi-Wan with a snide remark. And you happen to know in quote your quote folder, it's quote sound 1 that you want, then we'll generate the style code. And I'm just going to paste it over this guy. You'll see in here, it's going to tell you now this one uses quote 1. So this comment section of the style code is going to give you information for the sounds that you want those fonts to have. And that's going to come into play. Now, on top of that, hey Sawyer, thanks for the questions. And yeah, definitely check everything else out. I'm going to try to get to a few more things. Thanks for joining though. Let's see. So this, where was I? I get sidetracked. So this is very important information. And for those of you who are brand new to Proffie or who may not realize this section of code has 0 impact on how much space the style takes up. It takes up more space in your config, but when you go to load this style code to Proffie to your board, the compiler in Arduino completely ignores it. So this looks like a lot of text. It has no impact on how much space you're going to use on the board. It does not affect flash memory, but it's extremely important, particularly for a lot of the new capabilities, for you to be able to go back and know what needs to be set up to work properly. The other piece of that in this code here is the requiring of alt font. So this was Kyber select style. Again, this is based on duality by Wangsith. You'll see here also there's a requirement in this statement. So this style requires alt fonts, and it requires alt 000 and alt 001 to be set up. Now, if you get Wangsith's duality font or his Tano's lesson font, they're already set up for you, the Proffie version. So you don't have to do anything. If you have your own font that you want to go with a style code that has multi-phase, when you're going to set that font up, you're going to want to take a look. Oh, I moved it, but take a look at what folders are required. If you're missing these alt sounds in your font, the phases don't change because of how the alt font and the special abilities and the style code work together. If you're missing alt sounds in the font, and you can be a single alt sound, and there's actually a video, and I did say at the intro, this video here will go much more in depth. But just keep in mind when you generate style code, either in phase 1 or 2, that top section of that style code is very important. And you're going to want to take a look at it, because in order to make things work properly, they have to be set up that way. Okay, now let's go back. I'm going to go back into, actually, yeah, let's just go back to where we were. Actually, let's grab since it's apropos, we'll grab an Ahsoka style. So I do have new styles coming. I've done styles for all your characters in the Ahsoka series. As I said a little while ago, spoiler alerts. If you're trying to avoid spoilers for Ahsoka and I say something about Ahsoka, I apologize ahead of time, but I'm making the assumption that all of us here, being so interested in sabers, have watched that series. But I'm not going to give away any plot points, but there's obviously saber styles loaded, so there's obviously characters that you know. So we were talking about special abilities. So the other part of those sounds, so the TR sounds and the TR loop sounds, is because they are generic in terms of they can be used for anything, and we can use multiple of them in a single style. What's going to happen? So if I'm going to set this up on purpose, I'm going to do a play sound. There's a few other ones coming in phase 2, but I don't have them all worked out yet. A couple of them are acting buggy on me. Actually, one works, so we'll show that to you. But let's go here. So I'm going to do play sound ignite, but I'm going to choose a transition sound. And I'm going to do, I'll leave this the same, and then we'll do play sound and ignite, and we'll do another transition sound. And then let's do a final play sound and ignite, and we'll do a third ignition sound. Okay, that's good. And this one we'll do with a spark tip so you can see the difference. That's a center out. Let's do this one with a center in, and this one we'll add an overlay. Actually, not an emitter overlay. Let's do a burst. All right. So as I showed, I see a bunch of people joining. Hey, Brian, thanks for joining. Hey, Mountain Sabers. Anybody else who joined that I missed you? I'm looking at both screens, so I'm not seeing all the comments. But we're talking about special abilities. We're talking about transition sounds. If you missed the beginning half of the video, definitely go back and watch. But so what's going to happen, I'm going to generate this code. Well, let's show it. So normal ignition. All right. White blade, obviously. I forgot I had white blade active. Some of this stuff won't show up great. I'm going to change that to green just for now. So I know I said Ahsoka, but we'll do Sabine. So normal ignition is just a standard ignition look. But I can go to Special Ability 5. Special Ability 5 is going to be a wipe in with unstable reverse overlay. So I get a completely unique ignition on a separate control. And then here's where we get to our transition sound. So again, transition sounds can be whatever you want. If you want to have some kind of cool sound effect right before you're, so think of it as a non-Preon. The play sound in ignite just plays the sound and then does the ignition. It doesn't do visual effects. Preons obviously do visual effects if you want them. But these are meant more, a lot of them were from the idea of people wanting to do the, like a quote and then an ignition and have the ignition be different or faster or slower. But at any rate, you can play a sound. So if you want to choose a generic sound, you can get that set up. But so this one will be a sender out. So that's Special Ability 6. What would happen when you load on your Saber, if you have the TR sound set up, is it would play the sound first, and then it would ignite, and it would do a different ignition. And then we did 7 is a center in with a power burst, and again, it's going to play a transition sound ahead of it, so you can't see sounds. And then what do we do for 8? Is a spark tip ignition. So that one really quick, but that's there. But so let's generate our code, and this is where this comes into play. Get rid of this guy. Oops, not caps lock. So now I've got, each one of them is going to have their own transition sound. because I've set up unique sounds. So what that means is each one of these ignitions can have a different sound started before it, and these are the ones that are assigned. So the style code has to assign what transition to be used. That's part of it's how transition sounds and transitions loop work, is that the style code includes the information needed for the prop to pick and play the sound effect. Now, you do have to have those sound effects in your font, but if you want to keep them lined up, they are specific. So normally, like your sound effects, you have a clash, and then you do a clash effect, and it picks a file from the clashes, or you do blast, it picks a sound. There's ways around, like real clash obviously picks it based on strength and all that, but essentially normal sound effects in the OS are randomly selected or somewhat randomly selected from all sounds. Transition loop and transition sounds are not. Transition loop and transition sounds are picked specific by the style code, and that's intentional because we wanted to be able to have multiple different sound effects that are triggered at multiple different times, and they have to fit to what the style calls for. So what we're going to get is you're going to get in the style code now in the top section, it's going to tell you what sounds it needs to run with. Transition sounds also, because they're used in a lot of new style codes, they are controlled by the library, which is part of the big interface overhaul that I've been talking about. For those of you who've been keeping up with how long this has taken me, I have to keep track of what you're choosing in the library so that I can make sure that the style code includes references to the right sound effects, and that it doesn't. You don't want to skip sequentially, but you also don't want to have one effect that you expect one sound and then another effect that you expect a different sound, but then have the style code generate using the same sound. So that's why the style code includes this information. It's twofold. It's so that you can set the font up, but it's also because the library is doing the heavy lifting. The library is figuring out which sounds should go where, and it's based on what options you're picking and what you're trying to fit together. So now we're going to go two more things I really want to cover, then I'll get some questions. And I have a ton more, but I just can't demo it all tonight. I wanted to get the conversation started, but there's so much more coming. But one of the new things, and this is for phase 2. So those of you who are only on phase 1, this is down the line for you guys. Phase 2, as I said at the onset, like I said, if you're just joining now and you didn't hear my intro spiel, go back and listen to it. But phase 2 is coming. I have to work some bugs out. I was actually ran into a couple more bugs prepping for tonight's show. I had a couple that I knew I needed to fix. Found a couple more. I'm going to work on them, probably do a little tomorrow night, although it's Friday night, but definitely over the weekend. And then as soon as everything is as bug-free as I can make it, it will release. So we're in the home stretch, but because this library is massive and there's so much involved, I do have to get as many bugs out as possible before I roll it out, because I don't want you guys to sit there and have all kinds of issues. I'm not saying it's going to be bug-free, because even phase 1, there's still bugs out there that people are showing me that I thought we fixed. So if you run into a bug on a library, use the questions and issues link at the top, report it, I'll get it fixed. That's how this works. But I'm trying to get as many bugs out as I can. So I'm going to show you, this is a phase 2 piece, but this comes into play with our transition sound discussion. So I'm adding in phase 2, interactive blast, interactive preon. Interactive blast is pretty straightforward. There's a demo video. I'm not going to talk about it too much tonight, but essentially the two pieces of interactive blast are you choose it to either be a single blast, which means every time. So interactive blast, I will touch on it because it's a tease. What interactive blast is it plays a blaster sound. It does not actually play the blast sound. So there's a difference. I don't know what that is. So what interactive blast is instead of, so normally, like I'm using 2 button references, but when you click your aux button, you get a sound of the blast being deflected and a visual blast effect on your blade. Interactive blast, when you press that aux button, instead of the visual effect and the blaster deflection sound, it plays the sound of a blaster firing. It's a different sound file, so it has to be in your font. But what it is it's an interaction. It plays the sound of the blaster firing as if somebody's shooting at you. you have to swing your saber to deflect it. When you swing the saber is when the blast deflection sound will play and when the effect shows. And we can do it. We can do it on the library. So let's do that. Let's put it in. So I'm going to do single blast. I have the zoom screened in, but it'll tell you here what you've activated. So for interactive blast, you're going to click blast, and then you have to swing within 1,000 milliseconds. So the timing is based on this reaction time, and I tried to make it fun. So Citizen is 2 milliseconds, or 2,000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. Padawan is 1,500. Knight is 1,000 milliseconds, and Master is 500. I can't do Master. My reflexes aren't quick enough. But you can mess with it. So if you want to make it easy, just set it to Citizen. But the idea is to kind of make it more like a video game setup. So you're setting your difficulty level for that. But that's what that is. But what will happen now, we'll hit blast. And there's not, oh, there shouldn't have been anything on the blade. It looks like I got a bug in there. I'll fix that. But should be, and then swing. Let me change my color. It's not showing. I got another bug. Yep, I do have another bug. All right. Something got messed up. Let's refresh it. There we go. All right. I do have, oh, I can't show it. New bug. But the goal will be when you activate interactive blast, you'll hit your blast sound effect. It'll be the blaster firing. Swing within however many milliseconds, and it'll show the visual effect on the blade and play the blast deflection sound. So that's in there. The style code works. The editor, the style library is still being debugged. I see some questions. Brian, yeah. So it's something that's set up at the style code level. It's controlled there. No, reaction time is not editable outside of the style, outside of the library. So you'll pick it in the. I mean, it's in the style code as milliseconds, but it's in the middle of a very long transition. So if you can find it, you can change it, but it's not something in edit mode. It's easier to do with that. That's part of the trick of why the interfaces have taken me so long, is because technically the style code gets generated and you can edit it, but finding where this stuff is controlled in these new capabilities is definitely for more advanced users. Newer users, even with the help of the editor, are not going to be able to edit a lot of this stuff because there's a whole, it's in one of the videos for phase one, but the new control layer capabilities is essentially a whole bunch of style layers that tell the prop what to do. And if you change something that shouldn't have been changed, nothing works. Or if you introduce something that isn't in being handled correctly, nothing works. So the control layers that run a lot of these new capabilities are really not editable by the average user outside of the library. I've done all the heavy lifting through the interfaces to make sure that it spits out the code correctly, and that so you can edit it before you generate the code, which is where the reaction time selection comes in, that kind of stuff. So technically it can be edited if you can edit the style code. It can be edited in the style editor if you know what you're doing and looking for. It's not editable in edit mode, and it's not something I would recommend for somebody who isn't really, really in-depth knowledgeable about what's going on in that style code. Because it is a lot of these concepts for OS7 are a lot more advanced than what we've been doing. So in the past, we've been just basically you generate a color, and maybe you have the color fade or you have the color wipe or anything like that. That's pretty straightforward. Those are easy. The control layers are a bunch of essentially commands through style code that tell the prop to do something, and they're not visible to the style editor because the style editor doesn't know what it's telling them. So it makes it a little trickier when it comes time to try to edit that stuff. So that's why the library is trying to do all that for you. But I'll get that bug fixed. So this was the other sound I was going to get to, and this has a bug in it, so I can't show you it perfectly, but I'll try. This is one of the other, but I was literally prepping this sucker for the video, and everything was working pretty well yesterday, and then I made some changes to something else that I thought was unrelated, and I broke something. So I got to fix that. But let's go to this here. So we've got interactive Preons, which I've also shown in the demo videos. Is you can have the a Preon that doesn't actually ignite. That's essentially what an interactive Preon is. Now, interactive Preons are not like Preon effects. And interactive Preons, which you'll see in this note, which might be hard for you guys to see, they don't use Preon sounds. They use TR sounds. And they, depending on the Preon itself, it's either going to use the transition sound, which is tr.wave with a specific number, or a transition loop, which is tr loop with a specific number. And those run very differently than Preons, the Preon effects from OS 6 or earlier. And they don't work together. So the Preon, interactive Preon, overrides a Preon effect. It overrides the sound and it overrides the visual effect. If you put in the library won't actually produce a Preon effect if you choose interactive Preon, because they are very different things and they run very differently, but they work through the same mechanism. So what happens is the style code, the library says, hey, you chose interactive Preon, you can't have a Preon effect because you chose this. So it disables the Preon effects for you to select. It won't spit out the style code. But when it comes to the prop file, there's also on that side of the equation, if you have a style, say you have an older style and you're people who like to cut layers out of styles, so you cut the interactive Preon layer out of one style and slap it into a style that has the Preon effect in it, interactive Preon through my prop also overrides whatever Preon effect was there because of how they work. So the interactive Preon, essentially what it does is it when you trigger your Preon effect, your interactive Preon, it activates a temporary window for something to happen. And that something is described by the style code. And if that something happens, your blade will ignite. If that something doesn't happen, nothing happens. Your blade doesn't ignite and it stays off. So it's kind of like a temporary state. It's a conditional state waiting for something to happen. So in the case of the faulty core, what happens, I'm crossing my fingers that it works properly. If it doesn't, it's because of the bug that I already know about. But I was hoping this would work. So faulty core. So when I hit my Preon effect, I'm going to get this faulty core ignition. During the time that's happening, I have to clash, and then it will ignite. What would happen if I didn't? So if I let the timer run out, and that's controlled with this Preon timer, the ignition doesn't happen and the saber stays off. So that's essentially what the interactive Preons are. But how we interact with them can be multiple ways. So the faulty core, if you see here, I zoomed in on the screen, so it's making this a little trickier to read in this red section. But the interactive Preon, it's blocking my screen. So interactive Preon, you activate your Preon, but then when you clash during that period of time, it will ignite. So it's meant to be like, like smacking the old TVs. And I've shown a demo of it before, but that's what that is. The Atom Smasher. This one's a familiar one to Brian, but to those other ones. So what will happen here is this Preon effect starts with two things. So the goal is to twist. I didn't do it quick enough. I was talking. So the goal is you're going to get two atoms showing up on your saber somewhere. You have to turn your hilt to bring them together. And once you smash those together, your blade ignites. If you don't do it in the time, the blade doesn't ignite. So we'll do that again. All right, and then let's twist, bring them together. There's the ignition. It looks cooler with a different ignition. Let's change our ignition effect. Let's do a center out ignition. Center out, and then let's add a power up effect from the power burst, center out. This will look cooler. And I think it looks nicer on blue. All right, let's go back to that. So we'll do Preon effect. All right, let's separate them. You got to smash them. So we'll bring them together. There's my ignition. So then if we don't do that, so I got to put my twist angle down. So you control it here. So if I just leave them apart the whole time, they're in a timer and it runs out, no ignition. So that's the idea. And then there's one more. I've got a couple more in the works. They're coming. I just didn't get them activated. Like the wick. So another concept. So at this one, you're going to activate the Preon. I hate that it's zoomed in, but you're going to point down. So the idea is as if you were lighting the wick on like a powder keg. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a little ignition effect. So we'll go Preon. So this one, because this one's waiting for something, I added this little, there'll be a little primer vision here, but otherwise the blade stays dark until you do what you want. So we'll do it and then we'll point down and you'll see it lit the wick. And the timing might be a little quick, but we'll do that one again. So what's gonna happen, I'm gonna start with the blade parallel. This guy shows you blades parallel. You do the Preon, you get a little symbol here telling you it started, your timer starts, and then we're gonna tip the blade down and it'll ignite. And this one probably will look better with a white bin. Let's fix you. Oops, no, not you. Do a white bin. That, and this one might look good in red. So this time we'll do Preon, point down, and then ignition. And I might change the timing on that. It goes pretty quick. But that's where you point down like you're lighting the, your little powder keg, and then it's got a little spark that runs to the hilt, and then as soon as that spark hits the hilt, that's where the ignition happens. But let's go back here and we'll wrap up. I'm going to wrap up soon just because of the time, and I know I didn't cover half of what you guys hope to see, so I'm going to be writing a bunch of stuff up. I'm going to do more videos. Next week's really busy, but in the near future I'll try to do another one of these live videos, and I'll quickly see if there's any questions in the chat. But I'm going to use faulty core. So I know I went off on a tangent. Interactive Preons use TR sounds. They either use the transition loop or the TR sound. And again, the library is going to figure out what you need set up, and it's going to generate the code and the instructions. So we're choosing faulty core. Let's generate the style code. All right, I'm going to get rid of this guy. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, this whole section here took me a really long time to program this. It needs to stay with your style code for a bunch of reasons, but particularly because you won't know what sounds work with what if you don't have this. So this makes no impact on your flash memory. It's ignored by the compiler. It's just important information related to the style you generated. But so we're on interactive Preon. So interactive Preon here is the note. It tells you how it works. So it tells you what you selected. So we chose faulty core. It's going to tell you how to work it. So you activate your Preon effect, you clash to ignite, and then it's going to tell you what sound is assigned. And that, again, the library does that work for you. So this sound needs to exist within your font. And in this case, this one usually looped sound. So you would set up TR loop 1, and then that sound, the Preons are going to give you an idea of what the sound should be, but it can be whatever you want. But in this case, it's a glitchy ignition, just looped. So if you have a Preon that is currently like a glitchy ignition, because I know there's a bunch of fonts out there with them, you could just take that Preon sound, rename it to TR loop 1 or TR loop 01. The 0 being in there doesn't change anything. And put that in the font, and that will run with that interactive Preon. But if you have a Preon sound with an interactive Preon, the Preon sound doesn't work, and the Preon sound is never used. You need to use the sound that the style code is calling. The style code is calling this sound. So that's what needs to be provided. So again, that's part of what's happening. And so what you're going to get, so what happens, right, in this style, the reason the library is handling it is there's 2 TR loop sounds in this style. We have one, for those of you who are joining late, we have one set up already for the rain mode. So rain mode on the Sabre turns on a rain visual effect and a rain sound effect, which is a looped sound effect. So in your font for this style, you would want TR loop 0, and I'd have to add the note here of what the sound should be, but it's really what you guys want. But TR loop 0 runs with rain mode, so that should be your rain mode sound. And then TR loop 1 runs with your interactive Preon effect. And there's a lot more coming. So I said this a little while ago. I know a bunch of people joined late, but transition sounds and transition loop sounds are generic placeholder sounds in the OS that we can do anything with, and we can use them for infinite uses. And the libraries are using for a bunch, but I have a ton more coming in future phases. So your TR sounds are going to be whatever we need, wherever we need it, and whenever we need it. And they can be customized to each style individually, and they can run at specific points with different interactions. They can run off of special abilities. They can run off of interactive preons. They can run off of effects that you guys haven't seen yet. They can run as looped effects. So there's other capabilities coming that will add additional sounds just to the saber as you use it. But the style code and everything that the library generates is going to help you set up the font. The last piece I want to touch on. So the concept of transition sounds and transition loops is a specific sound is being called by the style code. But if you don't want that exact same sound to happen every time you do it, we can still randomize. And this is a big, huge piece that Frederick made possible that's on top of everything else. And that I do want to spend a minute or two on, and I know I'm going to get a ton of questions. So any other questions after we finish up here, just post them in the questions or issues link. But let's go there. It's actually in the pod already. So this sub sounds, let me zoom in a little bit, is the concept. But this concept, it's not letting me zoom in. There we go. This concept's kind of sat on a few people. I know a few users are aware of it, but I don't think everybody's fully aware of what this actually means. What this sub sounds means is that we can pick, so transition sound. So like TR, the style code calls for TR0.wave. When it calls for TR0.wave, if you wanted to have that effect have a bunch of different sounds that it randomly selects from, we set that up with this. And how we set it up is by using this subfolder setup. And I have a font open with it. And I think it's this one. Man, you got to zoom in on this. You guys can't see anything. That doesn't zoom, does it? Can't zoom on this? Can't zoom. How do I make the icons bigger? Extra large icons. It doesn't make the text any bigger. That doesn't help. All right. Trying my best here. So, TR, this is set up for that interactive preon. What happens is you're going to have a folder for TR. That's the TR sound. I know it's really hard for you guys to see, and I can't get this text made any bigger. Trust me, the folder just says TR, lowercase tr. That's the sound. In that folder, we're going to put a folder like this. So this folder is 00. That is what's getting called. So when the style code says tr0.wave, if you set it up this way with a subfolder, it's going to call randomly whatever's in the 00 folder. And in there, we've got, and this is in that pod page. The naming convention is the folder name would be the effect. So TR. So normally like a sound file would be tr01.wave, tr02.wave. What you're going to do for the sub sounds, you're going to set just a folder called TR or TR loop, because this is either or quote, or technically any other sound, but quote is the other one we'll touch on. Then in that folder, you're going to have, and this one only had one, but so say I had other transition sounds I needed to add. I would do, everything always has to be sequential. Don't skip your numbers. So I'm just throwing this together quick. I won't save this, but so what'll happen now is TR00, TR01, TR02, the style code is going to call for TR0. If you want TR0 to be a different sound each time or randomly selected sound each time, in this folder, it has to be 3 digits. That's the one requirement for this little piece. But you can set up 20 of them as long as it's 00. It could be 000 or 001 through whatever. These are then randomly selected. So the transition sound is called as TR0 by the style code. The OS then looks at your font folder, sees TR, sees the 0, and then looks in this subfolder of 00 or 000 and pulls one of these sounds randomly. So you can still, even though we're selecting a specific sound through style code, it can be random. And that was a big piece because it would get monotonous if some of these future styles are going to use transition sounds at multiple points. But if it's the same sound, like every time it happens, it's going to be boring. It's not fun. So this is what enables the randomization, and it can be as many sounds as you want. And because the transition sounds are generic, your 00 folder can be random faulty ignition sounds, and you can have as many as you want. Your transition 01 folder can be random, I don't know, like sci-fi effect sounds. Your transition 02 could be like random lightning sounds. Your transition 03 could be like random, fireball or whatever you want. And it's gonna, the sound effect that it's meant to be will stick with the style that when it calls for it, but it'll still randomize those sounds. Same thing with TR loop. So your rain effect, or actually this one, the other Preon, the faulty core uses TR loop. You would do the same thing. You'd set TR loop up, and then the subfolder would be like 00, and then within 00 would be 001, 002, 003 dot wave. And it's all documented. And I know I'll get questions. I'll try to answer. But this is what happens. So in this case here, in his example, this works for all effects too. I'm talking transition sounds and transition loops. This works for any sound. Typically, though, the OS randomizes just about everything. So there are certain instances where a specific sound gets called, but primarily most of your base sound effects are automatically randomized by the OS. So it's less necessary. The transition sounds and the transition loops are the reason this was set up, because we're picking one specific sound so that we can use them over and over again, but we don't want them to be the same. But that comes to one last piece, and that is for quotes. And this is something I dubbed as the mini MyCom. And I don't know if we may have lost a bunch of viewers because I've gone over time, but Megtooth was on earlier. I know he's big into MyCom. This is not to replace MyCom, but the goal with what we did in the special abilities, there we go. So if I wanted to play a quote, I know I need a special ability active. Anytime something pops up on the library, read it. I skipped over it because I wrote it, but it's telling you something. In that case, it was telling me I switched off my phase control, and this Saber style requires a phase control, so I have to keep one. So what happens is, say I wanted to have a conversation. Say I have quotes between 1 or 2, 3 characters. And I did a demo on this, so some of you may have seen this already. But you can actually control that with your Saber through special abilities by setting up these play quote group numbers. So I'm going to put them in play. These you set what you want. I know I need to keep one phase control. But so what I'm doing on special ability 1, 2, and 3, which is while the Saber's on, is I'm going to set selection this one to 0, this one to 1, and this one to 2. All right, so what that's going to do is that means, again, using those sub-sound capabilities, when I do special ability 1, it's going to call quote 0, but we can have quote 0 be random in terms of number of sounds. When I do special ability 2, it's going to call quote 1, but again, multiple random sounds. When I call special ability 3, it's going to call quote 2, quote 2, because that's what I selected. What I would do in the font, and I have this up, is I would set on my quote, right, and I set up 3 of them, is I would set 0, 0, and then I have random sounds. Now what I did, and this is in the demo, is I forget the order, but one of them, so quote 0, say, is cow talking. And then quote 1, I think, was like second sister or some other character. And then quote 2, I think I stuck Vader in there. And then I think 3, I might have done Obi-Wan because I had a bunch of Obi-Wan quotes from a different font. But so what happens is I can now create conversations between characters on my Saber by using those special ability controls. So if I want to have Cal say something, I would activate special ability 1. It would randomly select from the quote folder of Cal, which is set for 0, and it would play one of the quotes. And then I would go, and if I wanted to have a response from a different character, if I wanted Vader's response, I would activate whatever special ability is set for that folder. So I would activate special ability 3, I think we set up for 2, and it would choose a quote from Vader. On top of that, the other demo I did, again, this was a while ago, you can also make it so that instead of being character interactions through the quote special abilities, you can set the same controls up, but in 000, I set up one type of response. So I could set up all my 0 quotes are like taunts, so that whenever I want to taunt my opponent with a quote, I would activate special ability 1, and that would call folder 0 and play randomly a taunt. So that folder would contain all the different taunting quotes I wanted. If I wanted to have him talk to BD, which I think I did in the demo, I would set that to a different folder, and then I can have random quotes where it's him asking BD to do something, and then I can activate that at any time I wanted. And then the last one would be, maybe where I know he does a lot of talking about the lore of the Jedi. And if you wanted that to be a quote that gets pulled upon, you would activate special ability 3, and then randomly it's going to play one of those quotes. So what I wanted to do is quotes have grown so much that the old way the props were handling it just didn't give us flexibility. Special abilities with the new sub capabilities are making it so that we can do more with that. And again, the other flip side of that, the reason for special abilities from the onset is anybody who doesn't care about quotes or doesn't care about these features, you can do anything else you want with these special abilities. That's why and this is the beginning. And phase 2 adds a couple. I had to get some other pieces in place. So there's a couple new ones in phase 2. But phase 2 is going to be expanding. So there'll be more special abilities coming. Each one of these, the special abilities in particular, because most of the special abilities are controls that tell the prop to do something. So they're more complex styles, and they require more complex interfaces so that, first of all, it's easy for you guys to pick what you want and make sure it works. But secondly, so that we don't have conflicting controls. So the control layer, which there's a video on control layer, there's also a discussion and ask questions about it. But essentially, control layer is a new concept in OS7 that I've named it control layer. It's not a layer. It's actually a lot of layers. But it's the style code that talks to my prop in particular, because my prop has all these special features added into it to handle this stuff. It tells my prop what to do. That's how special abilities are enabled. Is they're technically, even though it's really just effect user 1, it's not the effect user 1 that matters. It's actually the control layer that uses effect user 1 that allows for all this stuff to happen. So when you're setting up a special ability, what's happening is the style code is including a bunch of their styles, but they're really more commands to the prop to do whatever it is we're trying to do. And they run through the user effects, but that's because we have to have an effect for buttons. For most users, the library is going to do all the heavy lifting for you. You just pick what you want. It's going to spit it out. And as long as you're reading that top section of style code and doing what it's telling you and including the sounds it wants, everything should run properly. Anything doesn't run properly, please report. Again, a lot of this stuff is brand new. I haven't actually loaded all of this to my Saber yet because I've literally every free minute been coding this library to get rid of these bugs. But the plan is get the bugs that I know about fixed, get this ready to go, publish phase 2 to my Patreon early access members. I'm aiming for this weekend. I know I said that last weekend. I can't promise what I don't know, but the goal is for this weekend for me to get enough time between Saturday and Sunday to get this done and launched. But it'll be very soon. These bugs that are popping up, I know why they're popping up. I just need the time to address them. Other bugs that pop up while you're either using the library, or if you go to load style code and for whatever reason it doesn't work, you can just report it, and I will. When you the other piece of this, and most people use it, but just so I've said what needs to be said. The link at the top of the library, either phase 1 or phase 2. Click this link. It's going to take you to Crucible thread. You can give a glance over it just to see if the question is there already, because if it's something that somebody already asked, the answer might be there. But if you didn't see the answer, you didn't see the question, ask the question. I will either point you to the answer or I'll work on the answer. But a lot of this stuff is really, really brand new. So there is going to be some hiccups. There's going to probably be some bugs either in the library. There might be some style code that doesn't compile, although I feel like I knocked most of that out. But any issues with anything you generate from the library, just report here. I know people go on Facebook. I know people go on like the Discord servers. I can't keep up with all those. I don't get to look at all of them, and stuff falls through the cracks. That's why these Crucible threads are there. Post it here. And I know other people try to help too, so I know that's why people post in the Facebook groups and stuff. But a lot of this stuff is brand new to the whole community. And Frederick and myself are really the two people who can answer most of these brand new questions because it hasn't been seen by anybody yet. So if you post them here, I can answer you and I can also fix what's broken. And those answers then sit in posterity for everybody else to come along and find. And then eventually make their way through the community, and eventually the whole community can help everybody. But at the onset, just post them here and I'll either answer them, fix them, or do what we need to do there. But that's enough about that. So phase 1 is public access. I know there was one bug that came across. I thought I fixed it. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. Any other bugs that pop up, report them. I will take a quick peek and look at it and fix it. If you're not sure how to do something, or you think you did something and it's not working, same thing, post it. Just include as much info as you can. So if you generated style code, it's typically good to post the style code. I purposely put some troubleshooting code in that comment section, so it helps me to easily find what's going on. So if you post a style code that the library generated, that's the easiest way for me to fix what's going on. If the library doesn't generate style code, that means it's an HTML bug. Try your best to tell me what it is that caused that. So I picked this selection and nothing happened, or I picked this selection. A lot of the bugs, what happens is the preview turns off and it gives you that little style code. Technically, not everybody notices it. I forget which one had it actually. I ran into one earlier. I don't know. I probably won't be able to create the bug again. But what happens is there'll be a little box. There'll be some white text here that looks like the style editor errors, because this is actually running the style editor. I've just taken Frederick's style editor code and fit it into the library. So it gives you the same output. It'll say like expected integer or expected color or missing quote a comma or missing a closing bracket. That happens, and I typically catch those and fix them. But if you get that, report that and just tell me what you picked, and I'll fix that. But really, we'll keep fixing whatever pops up. But most of this, my goal when I roll phase 2 out, is that's minimized, but it's not impossible. Phase 1, like I said, phase 1 went through a whole beta with my early access users. We fixed most of the bugs, but as soon as I launched the public access, somebody found one that got missed. So if you find a bug, just report it, and I'll tackle them as quickly as I can. Some of them are quick and easy. Some of them take me a little bit of time, but we'll address them. So phase 2, which is why a lot of you joined, on its way. I just have to get it fix a couple of things that I busted. And pretty much all the bugs that popped up just the last 2 days are because of stuff I fixed 2 days prior. So I just got to address them. And then I know I'm rambling on, but the last piece of this puzzle, phase 2 took me so long to get the interfaces set up. There's a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor that's going to get added in. So phase 2, I expect to be running for the early access probably through until January, just because holidays, I'm not going to have as much time to do stuff. But I also have stuff that I want in phase 2 for you guys, but I didn't get it done enough. And what was happening was I was spending so much time on the interfaces when it came time to add all these new styles, all these new effects, all the new special abilities. I had to start cutting the list down to get everything worked on so that I could get it launched. Otherwise, I'd be developing phase 2 until January. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch phase 2 when the bugs are fixed. but I'm going to do rollouts and I'll announce them to my Patreon. Early access is Patreon only. It's twofold. It's first of all, it's a big thank you to my patrons who've been with me or who helped me out. I do appreciate all of you. Secondly, is the amount of time that this library has taken me to develop is way beyond all the other time I put in previous libraries. It's a great thing because it adds so many new capabilities, but it is taking a lot of time away from other things I do. So that's where the Patreon comes in. That's why it's set up for early access. Every dollar helps, just gives me, so that when I finally finish this stuff, I can make up for the time lost that I did the work. But phase 2 will go public like phase 1 did, but don't expect phase 2 to go public until into January, depending, give or take. But between when I launch it and that January timeframe, there will be phased rollouts to the early access members. So there's a few other pieces coming that I don't have ready yet, but I'll announce them as they're ready. And if certain things don't make it into phase 2, just because I couldn't get them, they will be part of phase 3. But I'm working. I know there's a list of stuff people keep asking me about. I can't commit to anything because some of the stuff's already half done. Some of the stuff I haven't had a chance to look at, and some of the stuff I had it set up and it didn't work right. So I have to work through all of those. So as I get pieces added, I will make announcements. But the phase 2 editions are for those early access patrons. Phase 1 is public and free access. Enjoy it. There's a ton of stuff in there. Even beta users for my early access to phase 1, when I was looking through the styles that people were generating, there's a lot of stuff people didn't even realize was there and they didn't use it. So play around in the library with special abilities. There's a ton of them in there, but there's a ton of editing capabilities. There's a ton of new style effects. There's a ton of new ways to do colors with the color mods. The new multi-phase capabilities were like tenfold over what was possible in the past, literally. So there's a lot that I don't even think my early access patrons stumbled into and found. So there's a lot to explore. And phase 2 takes that up exponentially several times over. So once phase 2 launches, again, play around in the library, look for stuff. I haven't had the time to tell everybody everything that's in there because I'm too busy adding stuff into it. So if you explore and play around with the interfaces and look through the menus and choose stuff and just tinker on it, you might find something that you're looking for that you didn't realize was there. But I've gone on quite long enough. I didn't see too many questions. If I missed your question, post it in one of the threads and I'll get to it. And like I said, I'm going to try to do another live video in the near future to cover some more stuff that I know needs further explanation. But tonight I wanted to really focus on that TR sound, the TR loop sound, the subfolders. And if I glaze through it too quick, just again, ask a question. I'll try to answer. But that's going to be important, particularly for phase 2, because a lot of the new capabilities that I added in phase 2 lean into those transition sounds and the transition loops and having the font set up to support them. So I feel like I'm glad everybody joined tonight. Anybody who's watching this on reruns, if same thing goes, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the Crucible. That's the best place and really the easiest place for me to see them and answer them. But thanks to all my patrons. Thanks to everybody for joining tonight. And I will talk to you guys soon. Phase 2, as soon as it's ready, I will announce it everywhere so you guys are aware, for all you guys who are joining for that. Phase 1 is already out there. There's a lot in there to play with. So hope everybody enjoys, and I'll talk to you all soon. Have a good night.